Joining us now out of the News in Advance over there covers Liberty, the Liberty Flames. Damien Sordelett is joining us. Damien, thanks so much for your time. Appreciate you taking some out to talk with us. Are you on your way to Indianapolis right now?
Yeah, I'm actually just south of Dayton right now, heading that way. So hopefully we'll be there in a couple of hours, and looking forward to tomorrow night's game between the Cowboys and the Flames.
Man, how great is it to just be able to be back covering NCAA tournament basketball with the way it was ripped away from all of us last year?
Oh yeah, I was already making my plans to go with Liberty wherever the Flames were going to be selected to go for the tournament last year, because Liberty had already locked up the automatic bid out of the ASUN conference because the championship game was held on March 8th of last year. Won it at home over Lipscomb, and then we know what happened. March 11th, Rudy Gobert from the Utah Jazz was revealed tested positive, and then the next day is when Richie McKay gathered the players together and said the season's over, the NCAA tournament's canceled, and the guys that are returned, boy, they had a lot of motivation to get back to where they were, because they felt there was unfinished business, and a 23-5 record, third straight ASUN regular season and tournament title. They're back where they want to be, and facing probably one of the hottest teams in the nation in Oklahoma State.
Yeah, no doubt. That was one of my questions I was going to ask, because I remember looking at last year for them, and they had that automatic bid, and I had to be thinking, man, they were just like every other team in the country, but still, when they get a chance to get back into the tournament like that, and then it didn't even happen, I can only imagine that it was immediate heartbreak like everybody else, but the mindset of we're going to be right back here, and look at them, they're doing this again, and like you said, they draw Oklahoma State out of all teams, and I wanted to, before we get too deep into it, with the seeding and everything, kind of give us a bit of a rundown of the season for Liberty, if you can, kind of how they got here, and maybe what you expect moving forward.
Yeah, Liberty opened the season playing 5 of its first 7 games against power conference opponents. They opened in the Space Coast Challenge playing Purdue and Mississippi State. Went 1-1 in those games with a win over MSU. Then they went to Kansas City to play in the Hall of Fame Classic, because the NCAA allowed for multiple entries into multi-team tournaments. So Liberty then was able to play South Carolina and TCU. Went 1-1 in those games, opened with a win over South Carolina, and then lost a hard-fought battle to TCU. And then the 5th game against Power 5 opponent came against Missouri on the road in Columbia. And that was a game Liberty led at halftime, and then Missouri's depth and athleticism eventually wore them down, and they won by 9. But and Liberty has done what it should do during league play. Lost a couple early on the road to Lipscomb and to Stetson, but then reeled off 12 straight wins. They've shot the ball extremely well, and they play that pack line defense that has become synonymous with what you hear with Virginia. And Liberty's considered Virginia light, and this year they ranked 3rd in the nation in points allowed per game, and that's something that's really carried them throughout this year and gotten them back to the NCAA tournament for the 3rd straight year. And just to put in perspective, Liberty became a Division I program in 1988, and between 1988 and 2018, they had 3 NCAA tournament appearances total. In the last 3 years, they've had 3 straight NCAA tournament appearances. So, what Richie McKay has done in building that program there has really helped accelerate the growth of getting this program back from a once every decade NCAA tournament team to a perennial contender, make it to the big dance.
We're talking to Damien Sordelett here on the afternoon sports drive. You mentioned there the pack line defense. That's been something that has been brought up a ton with this team, obviously one of their identities, and you mentioned there the relation with it with Virginia. Can you kind of explain that to maybe some of the listeners that have heard that term a bunch here, but they still may not quite understand what to expect from that?
Yeah, the pack line defense is something that Tony Bennett brought to Virginia when he was at Washington State, and when he took the position at UVA, one of the first people he reached out to was Richie McKay to say, hey, I want you to come and be my associate head coach. And that was a big step for McKay to go from being a head coach at multiple stops to taking a step back. And the defense is predicated on packing itself in the lane, and you give up deep threes, but the premise is you prevent straight line drives to the basket and easy looks around the rim, and that's something that has Liberty's found as a strength within these past couple of years. Is they allow very few straight line drives to the basket, and they're very sound in terms of help defense, whether it be in post traps, whether it be help on drivers to the basket and whatnot. So that's something that it's taken some time for the group to get used to and to become acclimated with the daily routines that you need to do in order to be successful with it. And that's something that in year 6, we're seeing the fruits of all those seeds that have been planted, and you're seeing sustained success, kind of what you see similar with UVA.
Yeah, and when you look at Oklahoma State offensively, obviously they have multiple guys that love to take those line drives, straight drives to the basket. There, is this one of those games where, from what we know, what you know about Oklahoma State offensively, that maybe one of the tougher challenges for Liberty in terms of stopping some of that penetration? Because, like I said, you got so many guys on this Cowboys squad that really love to get off the dribble and head to the hoop.
Yeah, this will be undoubtedly Liberty's toughest task of the year, because the one thing that Richie McKay has said over the years, if teams have a great shooting night, really there's nothing you can do to stop that. If teams have certain actions that beat you, especially off the ball, backdoor cuts, stuff like that, it's in their offense, and you know what, they just out executed you. But the one thing that has really got under his skin is when teams are able to get those straight line drives, and it's coming if you're Liberty, but you're just unable to stop it. And that's something that's really frustrated him over the years, that he wants to make sure that doesn't happen. And sometimes the game plan is you stop it, and then other times is you just can't do it, and teams go to the free throw line quite a bit. They're able to get easy finishes at the rim. And that's something that, he's probably been stressing all week, is because that's the premise of the pack line. You don't allow the defense to get pierced and, and deflated. And, the longer Oklahoma State is able to find success, dribble drives to the basket, put your head down, get to the free throw line, the longer it's going to be for Liberty Friday night.
Talking to Damien Sordelett here from the News Advance covering Liberty here on the afternoon sports drive. So you mentioned their identity there defensively, and it's a squad that doesn't turn the ball over a ton. What would you say maybe this team's identity is on the offensive side of the ball? Do they keep it quick? Do they like to run their sets? How do they do it?
Yeah, they're methodical. If you look at the Ken Palm adjusted tempos, Oklahoma State is undoubtedly near the top, because they average about 15.8 seconds per possession. And then if you're looking at that, you have to keep scrolling down, and then you find Liberty in the bottom third. Liberty averages about 22 seconds per possession, and they usually value the shots, which means they're not going to drain the shot clock all the way down and then hoist up a shot. They're going to work the defense. They're going to try to ball movement, screens, backdoor cuts. They're going to try to find ways to pick apart your defense. And that's you hear these coaches that have played Liberty, they say they're efficient. They're going to work until they find the weakness in the defense. And sometimes that might be instantaneous, where you have guys collapse on a three-point shooter who kicks it around and gets a wide-open shot for a teammate. Or it could be they work the shot clock, and then you dump it into the post to a Blake Preston or a Shiloh Robinson. Defense collapse. They're able to kick it out, then a swing pass, and then you got an open shot. That's what Liberty does. And, Liberty's one of only 3 teams in the NCAA tournament, that Baylor and Oral Roberts are the other 2, that are top 10 in the nation in 3-point field goal attempts and 3-point field goal percentage. And so, in Liberty's also in offensive efficiency was the highest rated in the ASUN conference, and their offensive efficiency is one of the better ones in the nation. So, Liberty might have a slower tempo, but they try to be as efficient as possible with as few of possessions as they get. And that's something that, it wasn't the case when Richie McKay first got there. But in terms of recruiting the likes of a Darius McGee, getting Chris Parker, the transfer from Division II Henderson State, and then you throw in a Keegan McDowell off the bench. I mentioned Shiloh Robinson, who's a sophomore who's evolved. Kyle Rode, who his teammates call the offensive coordinator of the team because of how he glues things together through his position there at a power forward. So they have the pieces there that they know how to play efficiently on offense, and I think it's really going to come down to how well they play defense against Oklahoma State.
Well, and with that offensive style right there, and have you seen that this season frustrate teams that like to play fast, just generally even on defense, like to move around real quick, where they're over there waiting for a shot to get put up, and all of a sudden it's deep into a shot clock, and they're having to switch and do all that stuff. Essentially, what an OSU defense will bring to the table. Have you seen that frustrate other squads this year?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very frustrating, especially if you feel like you've played defense really well for 15 to 20 seconds, and then all of a sudden there's just one little hiccup in what you're doing defensively, and Liberty exploits it, and then all of a sudden you feel like, oh man, we just exerted this energy, we played great for most of the shot clock, and then all of a sudden, bang, Liberty gets an open three and converts it, or gets a backdoor cut for an easy layup. That's something that has frustrated teams this year, and Derek Johnston, the assistant coach, who basically has engineered this offense from last year's team to this year's team with more motion, more cuts, more screens than they had in previous years. It is very frustrating, especially if you're on defense and you feel like you've done really well for 2/3 of the shot clock, and then all of a sudden, bang, Liberty's able to find something to exploit.
And you mentioned Darius McGee there. He's obviously, certainly one of those names that pops up immediately when you talk about Liberty, when you look at Liberty. So maybe give Oklahoma State fans a little bit of the taste of what he's going to bring to the floor, how big of an issue he might be for Oklahoma State defensively.
Yeah, at first glance, if you look at Darius McGee, he's listed at 5'9" and 165 pounds, and he plays off guard. He's not the point guard on the team, and you would think, oh, he's small. We ought to be able to contain him. However, he's got a 48-inch vertical, and he's got one of the quickest releases I've seen from any player, and he's got a green light that is in the Steph Curry, Damian Lillard range. I mean, every time they cross half court, if he's got an open look from three or anywhere, he has the freedom to take those shots. And that's something that, you really can't defend, because you might think he might be driving to the basket, give him a little space, and then he just pops up and shoots. And we've seen at the end of the regular season, he went on this stretch where he was averaging about 25 points per game, shooting 55% from three, and he really carried Liberty to the regular season ASUN title. And he's got a dynamic about him where he'd rather share the ball with a teammate first, but he knows when he has to take over. And he's that guy that, as the season progressed, they identified him as a guy who could take games over. And he's someone that, if he gets lost, and especially the way the offense works, and him being able to run around without the ball and utilize screens and cuts and all that stuff to get open, he gets into a rhythm, that could be a problem for Oklahoma State.
That's the voice of Damien Sordelett from News Advance joining us here on the afternoon sports drive. All right, so who has the assignment on this Liberty team of guarding Cade Cunningham, or is it going to be multiple guys?
It'll probably be multiple guys, but I think the primary guy you'll see on him is Elijah Cuffey, the 6'4", 190-pound senior who is the ASUN Defensive Player of the Year. He's arguably been Liberty's best perimeter defender over the last 2 years since Lavelle Cabell graduated following that 2018-19 season. He's not like a skinny 6'4". He's got a good build to him. He's a lefty. He has no problem defending players that either go to their left or their right. He's very sound in terms of keeping his body square when defending players, and we've seen him over the last couple of years. He has taken out a team's best perimeter offensive player, just because he's able to frustrate them with how well he's able to move his feet, keep his body square, and use his quick hands to get some tie-ups and also create some turnovers. I think you'll see a lot of him on there on Cunningham. It wouldn't shock me at all to see a guy like Shiloh Robinson, who I've alluded to, who's more of a post player in this offense, but has the athleticism to guard a perimeter player. If you want to put a little bit bigger of a body on a Cunningham, you could put Robinson out there. He's got the lateral movement to stay in front of Cunningham for a good bit of time. I wouldn't see the extended minutes of him guarding Cunningham, but if you need to switch it up and put a bigger body on him, I would think like a Shiloh Robinson would be the second option to follow Cunningham around and try to limit his production. You're not going to stop him. You're not going to contain him. What you got to do is try to limit what he does offensively and force these other guys to step up. And we've seen those guys step up this year, and which is why Richie McKay has said this is going to be their biggest test of the year, because it's not just Cade Cunningham. It's a slew of guys on this Oklahoma State roster who have the ability to have a great offensive night, score in double figures and be the ones that help carry this team to the second round of the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, their depth has absolutely carried them a long ways this season with what Cade Cunningham does, no doubt. One of the things that we've been harping on this season for OSU that's kind of been a weakness at times has been defensively, them guarding big men down low or in the interior, when they obviously have talent themselves here on this team with Caleb Boone and Matthew Alexander Moncrief. But is there any advantage that you see for Liberty down there where maybe they can get some points inside?
Blake Preston has the ability to have some success down low. He's one of those quiet guys who he'll go about his business during the game, and then when you look at the box score, he'll have 12 points and 9 rebounds, and you go, wow, where did that come from? But that's the type of production that Liberty's going to need. He doesn't need to be a guy who takes over. He just needs to be a guy who's consistent inside, get a few points, play solid defense, and then that will help out. And a guy who was really strong at the beginning of the year, freshman Makai IB, he was averaging about 13, 14 points a game at the beginning of the year. He was really active, but he's kind of fallen, out of the rotation a bit because of, not playing defense to the level that, Richie McKay wants him to play at. But if he's able to, kind of rekindle that early season form where against these Power 5 opponents, he was actually playing really well. He could provide some really good minutes off the bench, and he's a guy who can stretch the defense because he has the ability to shoot threes. And I think that's a dynamic that if Liberty can tap into his production from the beginning of the year, that will help, Preston, Robinson, not have to carry so much of the load down in the perimeter, down in the paint, and give them another viable option.
So give me the full kind of feel how this team is right now in terms of confidence, and maybe how the feel has been around Lynchburg. The same way you guys draw Oklahoma State, you look at it, and people that don't know a ton about them, they could see that as a 4 seed. I'm sure they know the name Cade Cunningham by now. It can probably be overwhelming to teams like that, but how is Liberty feeling from a confidence standpoint that they can get it done?
Oh, Liberty's going into the game thinking it's going to win, and I mean, the last few years, you look at we'll look in the last 4 years, they've beaten Wake Forest, Vanderbilt twice, Mississippi State twice, South Carolina. They've beaten some Power 5 opponents. Oklahoma State's going to be another tough task, but it's one that they're not going into thinking, oh, we have no chance. Honestly, Oklahoma State should have probably been like a low 2 or a high 3 seed. Liberty probably should have been, possibly on the 12 seed line.
Sure.
But that's the selection committee elected to put this matchup because arguably it's going to have an appeal to see if one of the better defensive teams in the nation can stop arguably the number 1 pick in the upcoming NBA draft. And I think this type of game is going to draw a lot of eyeballs because you want to see if this little team called Liberty that generated some national attention a couple of years ago can replicate that against, arguably the nation's best player. Luke Garza from Iowa will probably be the National Player of the Year, and Cunningham will probably finish out being a unanimous first-team All-American and probably the National Freshman of the Year. But this is the type of matchup people want to see, and I think people in Lynchburg want to see this. They want to see, can Liberty's defense, step up to the occasion, and if that's the case and Liberty can pull off the upset, that only amplifies the work that Richie McKay has done from taking this team that back in 2013 when it went to the tournament had 20 losses, kept losing 20 games a year, and now they're perennially winning 20 games a year. It would just be another thing to help the brand of Liberty keep making a step forward.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because there were two teams that I had thought as well that were probably underseeded, and I think they felt the same way. Like you talked about, OSU probably should have been a 3 for sure, and Liberty. I remember reading about that some people thought they should have been a 12, and based off the where they ended up, I could agree with that as well. Last thing here for you before I let you go. Overall in this field, when you're filling out your bracket, when you take a look at it, who do you like maybe as the overall favorite? Is it Gonzaga for you, or do you like somebody else?
Uh, you know, I I've always fallen into the trap of thinking, okay, the best team's going to win, but I think Gonzaga is going to get tripped up somewhere, whether it be here in the first couple rounds or in the Final Four. I got a feeling like if Oklahoma State can get through the first round and then can get to the Sweet 16, I think the bracket shapes up fairly well for the Cowboys to make a run. Um, and for some reason, I like Baylor a lot, even though Baylor has struggled recently and, just lost to Oklahoma State. I think Baylor's got a team that could get there. And, it wouldn't surprise me if we saw multiple Big 12 teams get in there because I think the Big 12 silently was arguably one of the better conferences in the nation this year. I know the Big 10 got a lot of attention, but I think the Big 12, just based on how many teams were ranked, how many teams received really good seeds. I think the Big 12 is going to have a good showing this year, and it wouldn't surprise me to see a Baylor get to the title game, or Oklahoma State actually make a deep run and get to the Final Four. So, I know everyone jokingly says take Gonzaga or the field. Well, I'd take the field just because I think there's enough depth there that someone's going to get Gonzaga on a bad shooting night, and that's all it takes in this tournament is just one bad night where things aren't clicking to where, all of a sudden your season's over.
Yeah, I like that pick as well. You can follow him on Twitter at Damien Sordelett. That's at Damien Sordelett. Damien, thanks so much for your time. Safe travels to Indianapolis. Appreciate it.
I appreciate you guys having me on. Look forward to hopefully a good game tomorrow night.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Good luck for Liberty, and we'll talk to you later. Have a good one, man. Appreciate it.
I appreciate you guys.
All right, that's Damien Sordelett again on Twitter at Damien Sordelett out of the News Advance. There covers Liberty.